The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran, and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur investor, where you experience the highest of highs, such as when you made an exit to WeWork, and the lowest of lows, well, you describe that there are so many. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self-manage ourselves, keep up our energy and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything, well, it's not easy. In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspect accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Ori Manor Zuckerman. Hi, Ori.
Hi.
It's really great to have you here with me.
Same here.
For those who don't know you, Ori, you are a seasoned entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the fields of sales tech and AI. You founded several startups, including DiscoverCloud.com, database that was acquired by Vocalics, and YouMe that was acquired by WeWork back in 2017. Today, you serve as the co-founder and CEO of Substrata. You'll explain what it means in a few minutes. A social signal processing company that uses AI to analyze implied meaning and behavioral cues to help deal makers improve results. You're married, and you have one child, and you live in Tel Aviv. So it's really great to have you here with me. And I remember when I met you a few months ago in one of the events you made for Substrata, and I was really impressed by the way that you actually discuss about communication and the things that are not necessarily said and what we can understand in between the lines. And I really wanted to hear a story about how do you intertwine it into your entrepreneurial journey and how did you arrive to this. So maybe take me to the beginning, so many years of entrepreneurship and how it all began.
Yeah, thank you, of course. So I think it all starts from pain, experienced early on as a child, as a teenager. I was very sensitive, and I think I was quite shy as well. And I can vividly remember in how many situations I felt humiliated or just wrong, although I kind of said the right things, or I couldn't really spot anything wrong with what I said or how I behaved. And still something about the situation, something about the interaction was off. And in being sensitive, I was basically torturing myself about this over and over, OCD style. So that pain basically still exists, and that sensitivity still exists. And I think I was able to mold him into something that is more practical and has more meaning and can serve others maybe.
You know, I just have to interrupt. It's amazing and beautiful to see how so many years afterwards, still there's, something small of it within you that I think also keeps, you're being humble and the way you speak about things and the way you want to create an impact. And as children, we sometimes try to avoid or make these things go away. And as adults, as founders, we learn how to use them in order to create an impact. And this is what I see when you still describe those moments when you were a child.
Yeah, I agree. You got to get to a point where you accept yourself and accept your weaknesses, and maybe sometimes find some strength in these weaknesses. Yeah, for sure.
So tell me about the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I was just a student at Ben Gurion University, information systems, having good times, and I was basically experimenting with building sites, with monetization. I was a a major affiliate at the time. I'm talking about 2004, 2005, 2006, 7 to 9. And I was OK++. In that period of early internet, AdWords was just introduced. And I was building websites and information products, and I was hooking everything up. I used, back then it was called Elance, that was then merged into Odesk and became Upwork to get people to build my sites, to get writers to write my content. And I was just experimenting on my own expense. So when you're not spending someone else's money, you learn faster, especially if you don't have that much money. So that
you have
really,
to move fast.
Yeah, that really I think gave me an early edge. All these kind of experimentations.
And then actually, so immediately after school, after university, you began with entrepreneurship.
During my university years, yes. After a while, I became more known in the affiliate vertical or niche, however you want to call it. And soon after, I started ValueShine, which was a project-based company, and we did all sorts of stuff. I took a bunch of my friends. One of them is my co-founder today still, but a bunch of my friends from college, and we started building companies, building projects, serving others. It was the early days. Then I found that, okay, I need to make something more significant. Then I started a startup called DiscoverCloud, which was a B2B SaaS marketplace. It still exists, but I exited the company. I didn't exit with money. I just went. You
just left.
I just left the company.
The regular meaning of exit.
Yeah, the regular meaning, exactly.
Why?
It's a long story, and I don't want to say anything inappropriate.
Okay.
But I might have not. Maybe I didn't choose the right investors. More old school investors that didn't really understand the startup or tech scene, and in a way, they took over the company, and I didn't have a choice. And I really fought hard to stay there and to help it succeed. We almost exited there for real. Mm-hmm. Eventually, today it's just a normal business with me out.
With you out. Yeah. How did you process it? Like building something from scratch and finding yourself after several years that you're outside of the company, outside of the startup. What happened there? I mean, how did you leverage it in order to later on continue for your next startup?
First, I cried alone in my car.
Not being cynical.
Yeah, no, this is not figuratively speaking. I actually did that, and afterwards, I just learned from all the lessons, all the small lessons that I went through, and I took these things forward.
It's amazing how from the outside sometimes it seems to us that everything is like easy and we're moving from one startup to another, but there are so many things in the in-betweens and the way that we need to process what's going on in there. So you left DiscoverCloud and then?
And then YouMe. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts. YouMe was stemmed from ValueShine, but basically I founded it together with my very good friend and co-founder, Gal Hartzvi. Mm-hmm. It was an exceptional company, sales intelligence company. We had great clients, an amazing product that provided business information about hundreds of thousands of organizations and millions of people. Helped other companies do outreach, do some preliminary research, get to know their inbound leads. Very cool tool. I'm kind of devastated that it's not there anymore. Sometimes I feel like I really need it.
You said before maybe you sold it too early.
We probably sold it too early. We were first-timepreneur essentially, and we wanted that first success. There was a lot of unclarity, a lot of stuff that were just, as far as we were concerned, we could just walk away with nothing if this does not succeed. So we didn't take the first offer. The WeWork offer was the first time an acquirer reached out. But yeah.
Let's dive deeper in this point, because at the beginning I asked you about the highest of highs and lowest of lows, and you said in the lowest of lows that you had so many, and when you're younger it's easier because you still have a learning curve and you can improve, and as you grow older and more experienced, then you feel that you have to know better sooner. And then you said that you feel today that you sold YouMe a bit too early. So when you go back and try to understand the internal mechanism that you had there in your, decision making that you had, whether to do it or no, and you're considering several other offers in that manner. So what makes you decide not to take one and to take the other? Or with what else are you dealing there when you're choosing with which offer to proceed?
So back when we negotiated the YouMe deal, we didn't actually have any counter offers whatsoever. We were too young and too inexperienced to go ahead and do that and hire a banker that would probably get us some other offers. But what worked for us was the fact that not all of us were that into selling. We were doing great, and we were actually considering a large capital round. And it was either like to sell or to maintain the company, grow it, get to more customers, build something solid.
That's a short answer.
Yeah.
Or I'll ask it in a different way. What happens when you're almost closing a deal, and then in the last moment, it disappears from the table?
That happens a lot, and it's devastating each and every time, especially if you're needy, especially if your pipeline is not full of them.
How did you deal with this situation?
Like everyone else, basically, I tried to close it, and if I saw it's moving away, I try to chase it and resurrect it somehow if I felt it's dying or dead. And then it's just devastation, especially if it's a very important deal. Today, I'm far from it. I'll never do that again.
From feeling the devastation as part of it, like feeling that it eliminates you, breaks you in the process?
Honestly, today I feel like I don't get to the devastation part because I understand what happens before. Mm-hmm. So I don't have my expectations are not. I'm not surprised by anything. Mm-hmm. And my expectations are usually met, even whether I succeed or not, because I feel like I have a better understanding of what's going on, and I don't tell myself stories, and I don't put myself in a place where I'm expecting something that's not realistic.
I think that what you're talking about now, let me know if that's how you see it, that with time and the postmortem that we do on several things that didn't happen or happened in a bad way, not to the desired result, or also when things happen in a good way, to the desired result. So if you go back to the modus operandi that we had there and we analyze what happened and what worked and what didn't work, so with time we practice our inner machine learning and how to behave in different situations, and how to read the situation and how to manage our expectations from something which is very not not realistic, or not in the way that things happen in the reality, and we learn to fine tune this inner mechanism of ourselves. So you're less surprised, and the way that you observe things later is easier. But in that moment that you're a younger entrepreneur and you're about to close a deal, and all of a sudden
the rug is being pulled under your feet.
Yes. So what do you do in this point?
Well, there's not a lot to do. You're in shock, and then you
sit in the car and cry.
You mourn it, yeah, and then you get over it. The thing is that even if you have experience, if you're not open to learn the subtleties of what happened, you're not really getting smarter. And I think that with time, what we do is we do some sort of a reduction of our lessons in life, because it's easier to remember, and the cause and effect become more superficial. I think in deep learning it's called underfitting. Let's edit that part.
Okay, so then you know me, and then you selling YouMe to WeWork, and it's a great celebration. And what makes you continue to Substrata to the next phase? What makes you actually build a new startup in this arena? What do you want to bring into this world from your experience after actually the learning that you just spoke about?
Yeah, so the craving was there from the get-go. I was always fascinated about the subtleties, what's under the surface, the deal dynamics. But that's not the true story of how Substrata started. The true story was actually weird. I was at WeWork, and at the height of the company, when it just raised $4.4 billion from SoftBank and everything, there was quite a lot of office politics inside, like any big organization. But even, I think, more, because it was still a startup with the messiness of a startup. And I was seeing a lot of these office politics things going on, and I was not used to it because I was always the founder of a very small startup. Not a lot of politics. I was always the founder, so usually you don't experience that. And I was devastated by it. And I saw how much money and time is spent on stuff that are not helpful and are not contributing anything to the company. And my initial idea was to mitigate the negative effects of office politics in organizations by analyzing.
Great aspiration.
Yeah, big vision. By analyzing interactions between employees. That was the initial idea. So think of it this way: we're analyzing Slack or email, and by doing that, in scale, we can figure out the real social hierarchy in the organization, not the formal one. Which is, the org chart, but the actual one.
What happens in between?
Yeah, who has the power? What's the group structure within? And think of it, this has amazing value, and it's not visible to anyone, but it's there, right? So think of it this way: if we're talking about big public companies, and you knew how healthy the organizational structure was, this would be a major consideration in who to invest. Okay. Well, I invest in Google, who's organized like an amazing, Greek army, whatever, or in a messy company that has roughly the same number of employees, revenues, and profits. And also, it reduces the waste. However, this idea was put in the drawer because it had too many constraints, too many hurdles.
You can find so many interesting and insightful things, but the question is whether the company will want to do something with it, because it has a major risk if it's being revealed out to the world.
Exactly. So first of all, from an ethical perspective, tracking your employees' email communication and Slack isn't going to make employees love you anymore. Understatement. Also, if we go to the top, it's not an easy sell because in big companies, the top management are politicians. Okay, if I was ever going to get acquired with this idea, it was just acquisition to kill. So buy me to kill me and end this
sounds like James Bond. Acquisition to kill. So that idea went down
the hall, but that was the catalyst for a similar idea in a different vertical, and that's Substrata. So the thing about deeply analyzing interactions between people, but this time changing the circumstances to a seller-buyer interaction made way more sense. First, it's being done in some way today. So, people have already checked the compliance and it's fine. Sales calls are being recorded for optimization services, and the clients are willing to go through with this. And also, it's very close to the revenue, and it can really have a huge impact on a business.
So, before we dive a bit deeper, first of all, what it means, what it stands for, Substrata? Explain us.
Substrata is basically under layers. It symbolizes the fact that we deal with subtext, with pragmatic meaning, true meaning, the social signals that people convey and receive, and have a lot to do with how we behave, how we make decisions.
So maybe put some light on it in every conversation, every communication, interaction that we have, whether it is with investors, with our co-founders, with our spouse, within a customer, a client, or whatever. So there are so many things coming into this equation, and we'll talk about it. Maybe you'll have to define a little bit the different components of it. But you at Substrata, you focus on a specific point of view and a specific layer. Yeah. So we focus on the pragmatic layer, as I mentioned. We focus on more on the nonverbal aspect of interpersonal communications, and we focus on specific context, which is deal making, not B2C, but B2B, all types. So it's not just salespeople; it's also entrepreneurs, GPs in funds that communicate with their LPs, investment bankers, whoever is dealing with non-commodities, essentially. Maybe let's give a bit a background that, like in a very open discussion. So when we're getting into different ways of interaction with other people, it doesn't matter who it is. So we have like the very obvious verbal, as long as we're speaking, the verbal aspect of the communication. But there's also the body language and the subtext and all the things that are not actually said, but are influencing the situation, whether it is the way we look at each other, the eyes, the sight, whether it is the silence, the breaks, the poses, the body language, how we interact with each other. So you're actually trying to create some kind of platform that helps us anticipate and see where the interaction will go, or are you focusing only on the what's said or in between?
We're analyzing data in a way that will give you scientifically backed advice on how to push a deal forward. I'll get to the different types of nonverbal modalities or channels in a second, but first of all, let's start from the core. We are in the business of sales because we found that sales, B2B sales, that field is malfunctioning. It doesn't work. Today, roughly the stats are that 80% of all SQLs, I'm talking about leads that went through an SDR, have interest, don't use a competitor, have an intent, have the budget, they don't go through, they don't convert. Then 54% of all the forecasted opportunities that are already committed, meaning that the salesperson already marked them as 90% to close, 54% of them never close. So that's a huge gap between how salespeople today perceive their leads and what they are.
And where did you find out why it happens?
So why is a big question, but these are the stats. We know there's a problem. By the way, another thing that's really interesting is that the turnover in sales, which is the pace in which new employees are being brought in, pace of, is 3 times the average of all the other departments. So, product is working fine, pretty much. R&D fine, QA fine, HR okay, sales terrible. By the way, whoever had some experience, on the ground knows that sales is hell, and it's hard to get good people. It's hard to retain them. It's hard to get them to reach their performance peak. it's hard to it's really hard to find the people, because even if they sold well in the previous company, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sell well for you, because selling is way more intricate than people think. And by the way, that usually the people they hire for sales positions are they don't perceive them to be the highest talents, the top talents they have. But selling is extremely, extremely difficult, and you're the face of the company. So there's this little conflict between the fact that, okay, sales is the blood life of a company, and it's probably the most important function, it's the oxygen. But salespeople are like, you know how they're treated and how they're perceived. This is why we have all these new positions like AEs, biz devs, just because the word sales is already, people can't stand it because it wasn't done right. And we figured out that sales is, one form of communication. And to understand sales, first you have to understand communications. And we hired 6 world name professors on board, so we really got into all the heuristics and all the research, but we also eventually base everything that we do on data, millions of email threads analyzed and hundreds of thousands of hours of calls. And we think that we have a better understanding of communication today.
So what do you understand? How do you see communication, and what do you see as the factors that impacts on it, and how we can leverage it, and how we can actually help? We're not promoting Substrata now. We're just trying to understand, because salesperson we need in every startup and in every company, how to use the common knowledge and things that we can actually leverage their work in order to be more appreciated and easier, and actually help the business. So how it is all connected to communication.
Yeah. So let's look at it this way. Let's look at think of a sphere. It looks like a target. The exterior layer is, let's call it syntax. Syntax is just grammar and lexical meaning. That's the formal language. And the formal language is informative, but does it convey true meaning? Depending on how you define true meaning. But yeah, people on the autistical spectrum, they can speak the language well, some of them, but it doesn't mean that they will understand situations. That means that we have a bit more than syntax. Then if you go inner to that sphere, an internal subsphere would be semantics. And some people say, it's just semantics. It's a very erroneous term. Semantics is a lot, but I think it's easy to explain. Semantics is meaning within context. The problem with analyzing semantics is that the semantic universe is extremely fragmented. So,
and go try to model context, right?
Yeah.
It's like...
So it's easier if you look at big chunks of context. For example, East Coast lingo versus West Coast lingo, or accountants jargon versus lawyers jargon. But we have new stuff all the time. We have the metaverse, we have NFTs. Hell, you can have 3 different WhatsApp groups in your own phone. Within each, the same noun or nickname can have a whole different meaning based on the history of the interaction. Friends from college, friends from the army, friends from work, they build semantics. They build a semantic universe of their own. So semantics are almost impossible.
There's so much psychology getting into the semantics, because it's some kind of, which is very personal to the specific group of people that are sharing similar experiences or coming from specific background.
I would say it's less about psychology and more about world knowledge that has to do with experiences that the group
shared
has experienced.
Common experiences. And go figure, how do you define context of both, for examples? What can you say about them, about their shared experiences? Okay.
So we always say semantics is really hard to figure out, so we're not there. We are the people of the pragmatics sphere, which is the inner sphere. Today, by the way, pragmatics is sometimes considered to be the new frontier of NLP. And pragmatics essentially is true meaning. And that means what things mean for real from a social perspective. So let's say that me and my wife are coming over to you for dinner, okay? And my wife will ask you or your spouse, do you guys have any salt? Okay? And you would answer yes, and just keep sitting down. That would be a syntactically correct answer, but that would not be a pragmatically correct answer. So the pragmatic meaning would be one of two. Either, can you please
go bring
me the salt, or even maybe, depending on how it's said, can be a slight criticism on somebody's cooking skills. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's pragmatics.
Okay.
And we found that pragmatics is conveyed mostly non-verbally. And this is where we close the circle with your question. So we have all sorts of non-verbal channels to convey pragmatics. The first one is the most famous one is we call it body language, but it's actually called kinesics, which is a group that contains posture, hand gestures, facial expressions, micro expressions, combinations between them. For example, gaze to listen ratio. Okay, if I'm looking at you and I'm speaking and you're looking at me, let's say that we're not in...
Just to reflect, because Ori sits here and he's looking at me all the time about my face, about what I write, when I write the timings, and I feel that because you are so aware for everything that is happening, also to the pragmatic and semantic and syntax of everything, I feel that as we record here the episode, you're analyzing me in all those levels, because it's different from other interviewees that are less familiar or understanding it in the way that you do.
I can do that probably when you speak. It's really hard for me to do it when I speak. And this is why we have our own tool, because even people who are extremely aware, when their focus is on talking, they can't really reflect on themselves. But that group was called kinesics. Body language is one. It's just one. We also have Vocalics, also called paralanguage, which is everything that has to do with a voice. It can be the pitch of your voice, which is the frequency, high-pitched voice like Ben Gurion's, or a low-pitched voice like bass or baritone like Ali Einstein. Proxemics, more in Vocalics, we have your volume, your speech rate, interruptions, pauses, all these things are grouped under Vocalics. This is the second one. Then the third one is called proxemics, from the word proximity. And there we have everything that has to do with how we're arranged in space.
Setting.
Yeah, the physical setting. So the distance between us, close talkers, for example. If you see an entourage, you see Bennett, or even like a foreign prime minister, okay? You don't know even who that person is, but you'll know who's the main person based on his location versus the other person that's around him.
In the delegation, who's around him, yeah.
Look at a business deal table, okay? Even if these people speak Japanese and you know nothing in Japanese, you'll know who's calling the shots, basically, based on how they're seated. Even without knowing to explain it, your brain knows how to classify it. That's proxemics. We also have haptics, which is touch. Everything has to do with touch, how we shake hands, how we pat each other on the back. If you touch a bald man's head, for example, which is never a good advice. So that's haptics. We also have chronemics, from the word chronology or time, which is extremely, extremely interesting. It's how we use time as a social signal. It's not just about being late, okay, or how late we are, but it's also all sorts of pauses. For example, if I pause after you ask a question, or if I respond to your emails in a certain timing versus your response. WhatsApp included. You know how many couples will break up just because of chronemics? Millions.
And let's think about the WhatsApp and the two V's. You know what it means. If it's there or if it's not there, what does it mean about the chronemics and how we anticipate actually someone else to engage with us? And I think that even more over is the interpretation that we give into things which is not necessarily true. For example, I know founders that once they get an email, they have to respond immediately. Okay, this is their mechanism. It's part of their. They want to have a zero inbox, etc. And I know those that are persistent in not answering in the right, in the specific moment that they receive it, because they want to own their time and to decide when to do it and to prioritize it. So also each and every one of us is interpreting it in a different way, and what's true for one is not necessarily true for everyone in the way we choose to act.
Okay, I disagree on that point, because I think that we're actually interpreting it correctly. Sometimes if we become explicit about it and try to, tell it explicitly to the other side, they're gonna play it as if this is not the case. But usually we're pretty good at assessing the intentions and also assessments of the other party. This is something most people are actually good at, but in many cases they will tell a lie to themselves. And sometimes, it's a game of who blinks first, who's going to shoot first. But usually we don't see a situation where it's different for anyone. It's just far from the truth. By the way, the last common nonverbal channel is called textual paralanguage, or TPL for short. And that is everything that has to do with how we write emails or text. We focus on emails specifically, but think of it this way. I'm sure you've encountered many high-end personalities who are not really taking a lot of, are not adhering to grammar or to punctuation. They will sign their name with a lowercase first letter. They will write, part.
What do you think about it?
So it's not what I think about it. It is a whole field of pragmatics, and essentially
it made me wonder how very senior people they sign in a bad way, or even there are typos within their emails, and they educate the other side that you have to be very, very professional in everything that you send. And there is this dissonance between the way that sometimes they behave and also there are many marketing strategies that sometimes you should have this in order to make other get your attention in order to. So what did you learn about it?
These violations of what's correct are actually a power signal. And the same person that will do that will not necessarily do the same thing with somebody else. So if you're an entrepreneur, early stage entrepreneur, and a big time investor does it to you, it is not his style. If he would try to recruit Warren Buffett as his LP, he would not do that to Warren Buffett. Doesn't matter what he says.
So why does he do it?
Because he can. And it's a signal.
As simple as it? Because it can? Like it's a signal of a strength or
of competence. Social signals don't carry any liability from a legal standpoint. So they're a very safe way to communicate power. And by the way, the two biggest social signals that we deal with are essentially love and respect, which is sentiment and perceived competence. And they're key to understanding relationships, especially when it comes to deal making.
So next time that someone has a mistake in the email or in the way that he communicates with you, you say that there is some hidden understanding there, something that's some kind of message that he would like to convey?
What do you mean by okay. So I would definitely consider that, yes. If somebody is violating, what's acceptable from a grammatical or writing style perspective, it is a signal. It must be. Some will give the excuse of I was they call it in the bathroom and on my iPhone. But if I was Warren Buffett, you would still put a period at the end of a sentence.
And that's interesting because it also makes us, as someone who got this communication, doesn't matter by email, text, how it makes us feel towards it, because it impacts on our emotions and the way that we interpret this behavior from the other side, and what does it mean, and how seriously he takes us or not, and how involved he is in this, he or she, the situation or not. And they gave a signal and we respond to this signal, and then there's a whole mess beginning to happen there that we don't even know sometimes where to put a finger where it all began. And it becomes kind of a dance, of who's stronger than the other, what did he want to say, and how do we move forward from this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, sometimes the situation starts by when the positions of relative power are clear. For example, you have, let's say, a first-time entrepreneur, 20-something years old, and a veteran, venture capitalist. And it's clear that in every way, like the VC has the upper hand. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot of spectrum to work and act and communicate in a way that will convey competence to the investor. Okay? And here we're talking about two universal benchmarks or things. The first one is the point of being rudeness mm-hmm. versus bravery. In Hebrew we call that term chutzpah, mm-hmm. and it covers both, but it's really not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because when you're brave, you are perceived positively. Mm-hmm. And if you do it right, you seem like an unstoppable force, and doors will open, When you're rude, doors will shut in your face. What's the difference? We modeled it, actually. There's a difference.
And what did you find out? Because it's also very dependent in the other side.
Exactly.
Someone, Israeli, for example, an Israeli founder with an Israeli investor, maybe, let me know if it's true according to your model, will see the chutzpah more to the side of the bravery. But with example from a UK investor or German investor or even in the US or Japanese investor, he will see it in a totally different way. The same sentence, the same situation.
Yeah. The factor that's added here is the culture. And mm-hmm. who has the upper hand from a cultural perspective? What is the source of truth culturally? And that is also usually determined based on who's more powerful anyway, or on the stronger culture.
How do you model it? Like, how do you model culture? I mean, if it's your IP, don't share everything, but how do you exactly model the cultural bias or cultural origin into the conversation and into the communication that we're trying to anticipate?
We don't have a good model for the influence of culture. We have some heuristics that we think can simplify the results and be kind of true, mm-hmm. but we don't have a good enough model for that
yet.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something that when we spoke about before we started this conversation, you disagreed a little bit, but it is important for me to say it and tell me what you think. One of the things that I find very impactful and influential about communication and conversation between people, it can be between two founders, between two or three, between founder and investor, even in our personal lives, is understanding each one and his style and his way of speaking, talking, which includes also the verbal, but also the body language and the way he behaves during the conversation. And that if we learn in a better way to understand who's talking with us and adjust the way that we're talking with him or her, then it will be easier to communicate and to get into resolutions, or at least to understand each other. And it's based on the different communication styles that we have, that we all have part of everything, but usually one style is like more centric for us, which can be the driver, the controller, and can be the visionary, the one who's like very talkative and has very socially strong, and the analytical that needs to know everything until the last question and the last explanation, and only then he can move forward. Or the caregiver who's very nice to be with and very warm and very easy going with the things, because this is like the core of his way of thinking. And sometimes when we are more connected to one of these communication styles. So when someone else is in front of us and he's totally on the other side of it, it's more difficult to create a communication. And what I see a lot with the founders that I coach, and it's really impactful, that once we recognize each one and what he brings, and yes, it's based on their history and background and heuristics and how he was born and cultural and everything. There are many parameters there. But once we analyze it in a better way and we learn how to come towards the other side, there can be a resolution and they can find a way to continue together and to communicate in a better way.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the situation. You're describing a situation that is, it's not the conflict that we deal with, because we deal with new conflicts, new interactions with people who don't know each other. That's the common thing that we see in B2B sales and B2B deal making. When you're talking about interactions between founders of the same companies, co-founders, this is more in the semantic space. So there's a lot of world knowledge that's associated to the history, what they're used to talk about, and it's a whole different thing. About tendencies or about merits, for example. So if we're talking about new people, let's say that one person has merit A and the other person has merit B. Who decides if person A decides to adopt the style of person B, okay? The thing is that this is already a low power move the minute he's done so. So instead of making the other person like him, he's basically already lost points in the conflict. So who says conflicts should merge into one? What happens is they merge into one, but only after the person with the upper hand was basically recognized by both parties. So, people that have a certain style of communication, they know that other people have different styles. If the other person is going to try to build rapport or something, or try to move towards them, it will already be seen as a sign of weaknesses. And then, their style will prevail, and they might judge the other person for having a different style, but that's only because that person is already perceived as weak.
So just open here and say that this is something like that we can disagree and commit, and agree that we don't agree in this. I do accept what you're saying, that it's different if we have an ongoing and continuous communication and relationship versus a one-time or first-time interaction, which is totally different. So tell me, how with your technology you actually improve the way that B2B first-time seller and buyer, or founder and investor, or whatever, any kind of relationship actually leverage this conversation into bring better results and increase the conversion percentages that you described earlier?
Yeah, we're a real-time tool, so we help deal makers understand where they stand and where their customer or prospect stands. And we give them basically tips on how to push the deal forward. What's the next step? And it happens in email. And soon we're also going to release our audio product. So in email, email is like real time. It's not really a real-time tool because email is more stale than different other forms of communication. But in email, you can analyze each and every ping pong, each and every message inside the thread and see where you stand, especially the last one.
How does it stand with privacy? We're actually looking into the various emails, various communication of the clients and the employees. So how do you navigate it?
So we have everything figured out compliance-wise, privacy, security as well. We don't even, we actually ignore language, to be honest. We don't pull it. Everything is, what we do pull is our interpretations, our machine interpretations of what certain things mean in certain context. And of course, everything is built in layers. It's anonymized. So the privacy thing is really taken care of well. ISO, SOC 2, we're there. What was the extension of the question? How we do it. Oh.
Yeah, how do you do it? How do you improve it?
Think of it this way. You are in a very high-stake deal situation, and you have this ping pong maybe before a call, maybe after a call, after 2 calls. And, sometimes, there's a chronemic move that the other person did. Like you're sending out the stuff that he asked you to send me the deck or send me the product sheet or whatever, and then no response, just silence.
We all know it, huh?
No, maybe he's ghosting you, maybe not. These are just words, but there's actually, he will respond, he or she, at a certain point, but what does that mean? Or maybe they did respond, but what do they mean? Are they still interested? So we help you analyze each step so you know where you stand from a sentiment point of view, from a perceived competence point of view. Are you closer to the close one phase than you were before? And we also give you the ability to simulate your next email message to see if this is going to bring you to the position that you wanted. In audio, it's a bit different. We are listening to your voice and to the other person's voice, and in real time, after learning basically the baselines of each party, we measure the modulations of the vocalic features, and we help you classify in real time who has the upper hand in every turn of the conversation.
So like if I'm now first time talking to an investor and you learned our baseline and you know how, so you will give me like some kind of push notification, listen, you should now do this and this in order to maximize the odds to close a deal or to have a second meeting? Yeah,
it's actually, it's more condensed. It's like speak slower. Once we go to vision, it's like sit up straight. That would be the
like
real
things
time.
Like that.
In retrospect, and
which is also body language. It's not just the vocal. It's also how do you perform.
Yeah, we're not doing body language yet.
But sit straight, for example, it's part of it.
Yeah, we're not doing sit straight now. Okay. But calm down, talk slower, take more deep breaths are stuff that will help you convey the right message. Depending on the situation. Sometimes you have to talk faster, actually, if the other person's bored or something. Yeah. But it's not just about speed. It's about your volume. It's about your frequency. It's about interrupting. It's about dealing with
interruptions. You're actually doing me in the head of my founders, just, with this machine language. Tell me.
But you're not scalable.
That's true. I'm not scalable. That's true. We need to think about it. Ori, we'll hit a pause in a few seconds. Tell me, the shy boy, the shy young boy, like from 35 years ago, if he would have a Substrata to use in first-time interactions, how would it influence him?
It will make him a cocky bastard because he would not experience pain. But, that's just fantasy.
No, pain is definitely something important from our journey, and it makes us, learn new things and how to behave and how to manage our feelings and emotions. But do you feel today that with this tool, you can help other people that are struggling more with how to bring an impact or to close a deal, or those salesperson that this tool really helps them to make their work in a better way?
Yeah, I think most salespeople struggle, and I think it's helping them become real deal makers. People think of the madman, main character. I forget. Yeah. So they will know what's going on, and even if things not going to go to the right direction, they'll still be aware of it, and they can learn from it because we don't have feedback today. And this is the feedback. It's not your manager doing the feedback, which is embarrassing and painful. It's a tool that serves you, giving you that feedback loop that is so critical. It's like
from a different direction, like we have biofeedback, things that helps us to monitor our internal parameters and to see what is happening to us in the stress levels and the pulse, etc. So in that way, it's on the communication and in real time how to leverage it. how do you feel that it impacts you as a founder, being more aware to this and maybe using also part of the technique or the knowledge that you're having during this process?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because I think it gives me more pain eventually it gives me more benefit, but it gives me more pain because I see more mistakes. Mm-hmm. Previously, I was able
You're
to
blind.
Tell myself, lies and say, okay, that went great. That was a great call. No, that call was shit. And you made those mistakes, which are obvious, and you should have known better. So personally, that. But it also allows me to use my time way more wisely, because I can focus on the right deals that I didn't mess up. And also it really helps me, save situations that instead of making them worse. Yep.
Maybe one point to add to this, that at the end, that's what differentiates us as humans from bots or from other, robots, etc. And even, if one deal didn't happen, or we expressed ourselves in a way that we could have been done it in a better way, I think that in a way it also keeps us, being human and with the ability to get better from each and every time, and to keep it in a normal way. We don't have to be excellent all the time, because then we're not human anymore, and to enjoy the process and to keep on having this learning curve that we want to further grow all the time. So maybe it's also something that I'm better aware to things that are going on, but I'm also accepting myself in a way. I think this is also an important message to convey.
Yeah, I agree, because then when things don't go wrong, what didn't go well, and you don't blame yourself too much. You say, okay, that was a situation like in chess. I didn't play, well, but that's it. It doesn't really reflect back on me as a person.
Ori, is there anything else important that you would like to mention before we hit a pause about what you do, about your entrepreneurial journey that we didn't touch on and you think will bring value to our listeners?
I don't know. I think we're I'm seeing a lot of we're humans. We're fragile. I don't think that my past success has this massive influence over my present. I'm still struggling in many ways, but I think by being more aware and accepting, in a way, this is a deeper experience that allows me to understand myself better, and I think this goes to everyone else.
I really like the way that you described it, and on top of it, that what you're doing today in Substrata is really trying to anticipate the reactions and to learn better about the subtext, etc. But still, side by side with it, to accept ourselves, our journey, how can we evolve all the time? And you're saying even my past success doesn't necessarily always impact on what's going on, because I'm struggling every time from the beginning with new experiences. So I'm learning something new every time. So it's not necessarily an indication or indicator, but it strengthens our resilience in order how to deal with everything. Ori, thanks for everything that you shared today about Substrata, about your journey, and the agreements, the things that we disagree. I think it nurtured a conversation, and I really had a great time talking to you. People that want to get in touch with Substrata, or if you're recruiting, where they can find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Ori Manor Zuckerman.
Great.
Easiest way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
To our lovely listeners, we're going to hit pause until the next episode. This is also something I say to the entrepreneurs in my clinic in between sessions. If you enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you share the podcast with people who you think would derive value from it. Thanks to the amazing studios at Google Campus that allow me to record all this content here. Feel free to visit my website at galiblochliran.com and leave your details there if you wish to be updated and learn more about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Also, be sure to follow my podcast, The Human Founder, in any of your podcast apps. Let's hit pause. Till next time. Thank you. 012.
חבל לי שלא הקלטנו כמה דוגמאות מגניבות.
אפשר להקליט ולערוך את זה אחר כך. איזה סוג של דוגמאות היית רוצה להקליט?
רציתי להראות דוגמה שבו אני מראה את האפקט של מניפולציה בבויס, למשל.
איך אתה רוצה להראות את זה? להקליט? כאילו יש לך איזה קול שהיית רוצה להקליט?
לא, אני פשוט יכול להדגים.
להדגים?
כן.
אוקיי, אז אתה רוצה שאנחנו נעשה איזה...
Ori, can you give me an example of Vocalics, the second non-verbal channel that you
אז רגע,
mentioned?
אני רק כותבת, אני ממשיכה, שנייה, כמה דוגמאות, ונכניס את זה אחרי קטע שהסברת על כל המעגלים, על הספרות, נכון?
לא, שהסברתי על קינזיקס, ווקליקס, הוויס.
כן, ווקליקס, פרוקסימיסטי.
אז כאילו, can you give me a good example?
בווקליקס.
Or what you found about Vocalics, כן.
על ווקליקס. אז רגע, אני רק כותבת לי, אחרי ווקליקס, וזה 01-13-48. Ori, can you give me a few examples of how it looks like in real life about this Vocalics? Pitch, frequencies, volume, how it looks like.
Yeah, let me give you a very funny example.
Okay.
What do you think happens if simultaneously you will increase your voice's frequency or pitch, okay, go up. And while doing so, simultaneously, you'll actually decrease your speech rate, talk slower, but go up.
Show me how it happens.
So, to be honest, I don't know how to show you. It's kind of complicated. So, that little manipulation we found makes people feel they're being tested. They will kind of resent the person who's doing so because they feel like that person is setting a trap. And to be honest, we can't really explain why, but we know one thing, it's not natural, although a lot of people do it. And when something is not natural, our brain has its own ways of, pulling a red flag.
When you did it now, I felt that you're like judging me. That something, my interpretation to the situation that you changed your tones and rhythm, I felt that you're like looking at me from above and judging me. How do I respond to it?
Yeah. Or inviting you to fall into a trap, essentially, which because I know something that you don't. So this is just one of a ton of examples of how people manipulate voice or use voice as a social signal.
So you actually model and anticipate these different kind of behaviors and can give me a signal, oh golly, now he's doing that, he's doing this manipulation, so don't act in this way because then you're falling into the trap that he tried to do to you?
Correct.
Great. Do you have any other example to give us? Or
pause. אני צריך לחשוב על זה.
אוקיי, לא חייבים גם. אתה רוצה עוד או
שנייה, תני לחשוב.
בסדר, זה 1-16. 3, דוגמה נוספת.
אוקיי, יש לי.
אז רגע, ממשיכים לדוגמה נוספת באותו המשך. Another example?
Another example is interruptions, for example. We Israelis, we always think that we're very intrusive in the way we interrupt others. And it's true to a degree, but interruptions are relative. And when you analyze interruptions, you find all sorts of interesting things. For example, the patterns and what they mean and what's a successful interruption versus an unsuccessful interruption.
Give me an example. Because I used to be someone, before I practiced, this muscle, that interrupt a lot in conversation because I had something to say and it was smart. And I really felt like I have to say it. But it disturbed the other side, in the flow and what he wanted to convey. And I learned how to control it and minimize it. So what are the effects that the interruptions can have?
So first of all, your last utterance, your last sentence was a successful interruption, because you basically didn't wait enough time until you responded to me. And then when you started speaking, I didn't stop you. So you basically...
I got your approval.
You didn't get my approval. You conquered the turn that belonged to me. I had just a bit more to go. A non-successful interruption is when I try to do that, but I'm getting stopped by the other party, and that actually can work against me. But it's all about the patterns. It's all relative. Interruptions are fascinating.
Exactly. And when you're talking about it, really, I feel that interruptions is one of the things that if we learn how to master in the right way, which is not artificial, that it becomes, part of us. And the way that we use our communication methods, it really, first of all, very empowering and really connects between the two parties of the conversation, because it's dynamic. It makes it dynamic, and not just I'm talking, he's talking, I'm talking, he's talking. It's the dynamic between us. So it's really interesting how you were taking a specific part or a specific pattern of conversation and really examine it and describe the spectrum of good or bad ways to interrupt a conversation. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Another very interesting example is in body language, or specifically in a combination of two. I kind of mentioned it before, but gaze to listen ratio. So let's say that we're just hanging, we're discussing something, and while one person is talking, the other and he looks to the other person in the eyes, the other person will actually divert his gaze to a very specific time length, and then basically we have a situation where one person is talking to the other person, looking at him in his eyes, but the other person is actually
look to the side.
Doesn't look to the side. His eyes break the gaze. Okay. And that break, if it's done in a certain way, can also be a very strong signal of competence, of authority, of superiority. There's many of these.
It's really
thousands.
It's really amazing, and it's a whole knowledge and so many examples to learn how to master. Anything else?
The thing that's interesting is that sometimes people who are too focused on one specific pattern can actually misinterpret the situation, because they're not attuned to how this pattern is
influencing
is built within a bigger pattern, or interacting with different other patterns. So you have to be a very good listener to read.
That's the point, I think, and I discussed it in several episodes in here, that I think that everything begins in being a good listener and listen to the situation and to everything that is happening, both for the person who speaks and his body language and the circumstances and the rhythm and the time, and that everything that is happening in the here and now. And that helps you to communicate in a better way, because you can feel those different patterns and to navigate them in the right way. So it all begins with deep listening. This is the way I see it.
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay.